and welcome to the Clinical Care Options Infectious Disease Podcast. I'm your host, Scientific Director Kimberly Miller. In today's episode, we will discuss the recent FDA approval of Lenacapavir for PrEP and how this could affect the landscape of HIV prevention in the near future. Joining us today are two expert faculty members, Dr. Colleen Kelley, Professor of Medicine at Emory University School of Medicine in Georgia, and Dr. Raphael Landovitz, Professor of Medicine at UCLA. This episode is part of a larger educational program titled Advances in HIV Care, a rapid response webinar series. For more information on Dr. Kelley and Dr. Landovitz, along with a link to the larger educational program and the accompanying slides for this podcast, please visit the show notes for this episode. Now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to today's continuing medical education webinar. My name is Kimberly Miller, Scientific Director at Clinical Care Options, and I'll be moderating today. This webinar is entitled Lenacapavir Approval, What to Know When Selecting a PrEP Regimen. The program is brought to you by Clinical Care Options in partnership with the Association of Nurses in AIDS Care, American Academy of HIV Medicine and Health HIV, and is supported by an educational grant from Gilead Sciences. Joining us today are our two expert faculty members, Dr. Colleen Kelley, Professor of Medicine at Emory University School of Medicine in Georgia, and Dr. Raphael Landovitz, Professor of Medicine at UCLA.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you all for joining today. On behalf of my co-faculty, Colleen Kelley, we'd like to welcome you to this webinar. We're really excited to engage with you in this conversation about the recent FDA approval of Lenacapavir for pre-exposure prophylaxis and talk about how it fits into the prevention toolbox. I'm going to begin with a really rapid overview of just the current landscape of PrEP, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kelley to go over the clinical trial data for Lenacapavir, and then we'll talk about some practical implications of the approval and implementation. This is a chart that I unabashedly stole from the IAS USA 2024 guidelines, just as a reminder of the currently, before Len was approved, available systemic PrEP options that are available in the United States and the populations and circumstances for which there is an indication. The only thing I would really highlight in this, other than that I love to print this out, laminate it, and keep it in my clinic as a useful way to have conversations with patients about their options for HIV prevention if they're interested in a biomedical strategy, is this sort of blue question mark that's in the daily TAF FTC column. And I want to point it out because until recently, there was no recommendation, and before the Purpose 1 trial, no data supporting the use of TAF FTC daily for vaginal protection. And a post hoc analysis was presented at CROI this past year that suggested about a 90% reduction in HIV incidence in people overwhelmingly exposed to HIV vaginally who had evidence on biomarkers of 2 or more doses per week on average. So the IAS USA 2024 guidelines actually do now endorse that TAF FTC is a reasonable choice for vaginal protection. So just wanted to highlight that as well. We have great options for PrEP, but it's really exciting to now have an approval for Lenacapavir, which had previously had U.S. regulatory approvals for treatment of heavily experienced patients with HIV, and that had been since August of 2022. I think everybody's aware of that. And then there's a pair of registrational trials that have now resulted that support the use of the product in the prevention setting, and Colleen will go over those results in detail. The indication for which Lenacapavir now, as of June 18th, has approval for prevention is to reduce the risk of sexually acquired HIV in adults and adolescents with a minimum weight of 35 kilograms who are likely to be exposed to HIV. And I just want to give a little parenthetical here that although there is not a specific indication, because that hasn't been studied in people whose only route of exposure is in injection drug use, it's important for us all to remember that people who do inject drugs very frequently also have sexual exposures that might fall into this general rubric. And so because someone injects drugs in my mind anyway, is not an indication to say that we cannot use lenacapavir. As with all PrEP regimens, it's really important to have establishment of negative HIV status before starting a biomedical prevention agent. The FDA package insert clearly says that we are obligated to do an antigen antibody test as well as an RNA test before starting, and a test that is approved for HIV diagnostics follow up. But if a rapid test is used in that context, a more sensitive test should be done, but not awaited for at follow up. Important to remember that it seems like a large percentage of the extremely rare breakthrough infections that happen on Len do have resistance to the capsid inhibitors with some signature mutations. And of course, the use of Len for PrEP is part of a comprehensive prevention package with elements shown here. The dosing, hopefully everybody is quite comfortable with. Happily, the basic dosing is fairly straightforward. It's a pair of 1.5 milliliter subcutaneous injections. They can be administered in the periumbilical abdomen region or the anterior thigh. Some of you who participated in the clinical trials may be wondering why the gluteal or the back of the arm is not included in this FDA indication. I'm told that there just wasn't a robust enough data set at the time of submission for that to be included. But obviously, if the data submit it, hopefully we can anticipate a more generalized indication in terms of locations for injection later. That first injection should be accompanied by 2 of the lenacapavir oral tablets on that same day, and that's to get lenacapavir levels and concentrations to protective concentrations as quickly as possible. Day 2, which does not obviously have another injection associated with it, just has another 2-tablet oral dosing. And then the continuation regimen is just another pair of that subcutaneous injections 6 months from that original injection date. And the window on that is 14 days. And if the injection is going to be delayed more than that 14-day period, so more than 28 weeks from the first injection, there is a recommendation for oral bridging with a dose of 300 milligrams. That's a single tablet of the lenacapavir weekly, and that can be done up to 6 months in terms of bridging. There are a number of important drug interactions that you need to know about. So we're not going to go through them on this webinar because they're a little complicated, but some of those drug-drug interactions, particularly with strong and medium inducers of cytochrome P453A, actually require a supplemental dosing regimen of the lenacapavir. And it's honestly a little bit complicated, so please do take a look at the package insert for instructions of how to do that in the context of medium or strong inducers such as antiepileptics or rifamycins and a number of other drugs that might commonly be used. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Kelley for a review of the phase 3 data, and then we can talk about where this fits into our prevention toolbox and some implementation questions. Dr. Kelley.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Landovitz. So I am going to briefly go over the clinical trial results from PURPOSE 1 and PURPOSE 2, both published last year in the New England Journal of Medicine as more or less sister or brother trials. So PURPOSE 1 was conducted among cisgender women in South Africa and Uganda, and there were 5,345 women enrolled in that trial of young age, ages 16 to 25. And this trial was a little bit different to distinguish it from PURPOSE 2, not just based on the population enrolled, but also based on the design, and that participants were randomized 2 to 1 to lenacapavir, FTAF, or FTDF. And so it was placebo-controlled and blinded throughout the randomized blinded phase. And the primary analyses were looking at a novel design where they compared HIV incidence in the lenacapavir arm versus a background HIV incidence that was constructed based on recency testing in a screening cohort of individuals. This study was also designed to look at FTAF versus background incidence. Secondary outcomes looked at FTDF with HIV incidence versus background, as well as versus FTAF. These are the baseline characteristics, and these are the data from the PURPOSE 1 that primarily led to the thigh indication as an alternate dosing site to the abdomen. Almost all of the injections in the initial trial results were delivered in the abdomen. However, 32 pregnant participants did receive injections in the thigh, which allowed that data to be submitted to the FDA to allow for that alternate site. It's also important to note, as I mentioned, that this was an extremely young population, 21 years of age across all the arms. And because these studies were only conducted in sub-Saharan Africa, all among cisgender women of Black race. When we look at PURPOSE 2, this was the partner trial that was conducted among cisgender men, transgender women, transgender men, and gender non-binary people. And this was an international trial conducted across several countries, and we'll review that in the next slide, among 3,292 people. And in this study, participants without HIV were randomized 2-to-1 to lenacapavir versus FTDF. We obviously already have FTF indication for this population, and so that is a distinction in the study design between the two studies. Again, this was a novel study design where a background HIV incidence was calculated based on a screening cohort, and the incidence in lenacapavir was compared to that background HIV incidence for the primary outcome analysis. Secondary outcomes included comparisons to FTDF as well as adherence on therapy and safety. These are the baseline characteristics for PURPOSE 2. Also of note, a fairly young population as well. And if you look at prior PrEP use and prior HIV testing, you can see that this trial really succeeded in enrolling the folks who needed PrEP. Many people never used PrEP before, but high prevalence of stimulant use, as well as other risk behaviors and STIs. You can also see the overall participation was pretty diverse across Latin America, Thailand, South Africa, and the US. And so it's important to see the global relevance of both of these trials. So these are the primary incidence analyses, as I said, that were published last year. On the left of the slide, we have PURPOSE 1, again, cisgender women, and on the right, PURPOSE 2, cisgender men, transgender men and women, and binary people. There was a median follow-up of 44 weeks in PURPOSE 1 and similarly 39 weeks in PURPOSE 2. Both of these trials were stopped early because of the incredible efficacy that was found by the data safety and monitoring boards of both trials. You can see the just astounding results from PURPOSE 1 of 0 new HIV infections in participants who are randomized to lenacapavir. That's compared to 39 infections that were seen in the FTF arm and 16 in the FTDF arm. When we look at PURPOSE 2, again, incredibly low HIV incidence at 0.1 per 100 person years. That was 2 new HIV infections during follow-up in people who were randomized to the lenacapavir arm. That's compared to 9 that occurred in the FTDF. Again, less participants randomized to FTDF, so I can't really equate those number of infections, really need to compare the incidence rates. So FTDF 0.93 per 100 person years. And so overall, among cisgender women, lenacapavir reduced HIV infections by 100% in PURPOSE 1 and in PURPOSE 2 by 96% compared to background HIV incidence. Really, really just astounding, incredible results. And so here are the primary incident rate ratios, where you can see, again, a big fat 0 for PURPOSE 1 for lenacapavir versus background incidence. But now we also see the inclusion of FTAF compared to background HIV incidence. It was not shown to be effective in PURPOSE 1. And also in PURPOSE 1, when compared FTAF versus FTDF, there was actually no difference in HIV incidence. This was thought or found to be due to low adherence to the oral medication, which we have seen before in plenty of PrEP trials. And so not terribly surprising. But as Rafi mentioned in a sub-analysis that was presented at CROI, when restricted to those participants who did adhere to the oral study drug, it did appear that FTAF did provide HIV prevention efficacy, and so has led to the IAS support of use in cisgender women, which is really just great to have. When we look at PURPOSE 2, the incident rate ratio versus background incidence of 0.04 for that 96% reduction in HIV incidence, when compared to FTDF, 89% reduction in incidence compared to FTDF. So really just incredible and really speaks to the power of long-acting injectables' ability to overcome problems with daily oral adherence. On the next couple of slides, we just have the safety analysis with the exception of injection site reactions. Not going to go into these in great detail. The slides are available for download, but what you can see is there was not much difference across the arms, and also that very, very few participants needed to discontinue drug due to adverse events. Similarly, among Purpose 2, very few participants had to discontinue due to adverse events, and the adverse events were similar across the two arms, with one exception, and that was changes in eGFR that were seen in the FTDF arms that might be expected, declines in GFR with FTDF. That is a well-known effect of that drug. There were 4 deaths in the Lenacapavir group 2 and FTDF. None were deemed related to study drug. So injection site reactions, it is important for people to understand that because of the drug depot that is injected into the subcutaneous space, there is going to be a nodule in the vast majority of people. And so the vast majority of people in both trials reported some mild grade 1 injection site reactions. It is unusual for them to be associated with pain, swelling, or erythema, but it has been reported in a very small percentage of patients. Overall, though, people did not discontinue drug by and large because of the nodules, only 4 in Purpose 1 and 26 in Purpose 2. Overall, these appears to be very tolerable. It's also notable that over time, if you look longitudinally, that the injection site reactions appear to decrease. This is actually something that's been seen with other injectable agents in other studies for both treatment and prevention, and may not necessarily reflect anything to do necessarily with this drug in particular, as it's been seen in other studies as well. So, Rafi, I'll let you comment here.
Sure. So just as Colleen said, injection site reactions as a nodule seem to be fairly common, but more severe reactions seem to be very infrequent, but are getting a fair bit of chatter. I do not want to scare people away, but I just want to make people aware that injection technique does seem to be a really important component of predicting a painful injection site reaction. On the left side of the slide is a case that's now been published in AIDS as a clinical image. This is actually in the heavily treatment experienced population. This is not PrEP, but this is a first injection of someone getting lenacapavir who had dense erythema and pain and ended up getting hospitalized for pain control and antibiotics. It was a foreign body granulomatous reaction on a biopsy. And you can see in that 1B photo what that looked like 6 months after that first injection. And on the right side of the slide is someone who I guess moved during the subcutaneous injection. And this is a PrEP context. This is a photo courtesy of Kim Workowski from Emory and the CDC, and it did cause an ulceration. So injection technique is really important. And there are instructions in the package insert and some videos online from the manufacturer that are really helpful. And I encourage anyone who has not had experience with it to look at those carefully because there is a skill to being able to inject this.
Thanks, Rafi. Just to go very quickly, as with all antiretrovirals, there is a risk of lenacapavir resistance, either in people who receive lenacapavir who are viremic or those who very rarely acquire HIV. And so HIV testing before each injection and throughout therapy at follow-up injections every 6 months at a minimum is needed. And so also, we learned a lot with cabotegravir about the tail and what does that mean? And we're still learning about the tail and what that means for resistance with cabotegravir. The same thing needs to be taken into account with lenacapavir, and that drug concentrations are going to be present for at least 12 months and maybe even longer after subcutaneous dosing. For people that do not continue lenacapavir but who still need PrEP, we need to be able to offer them alternate regimens. And in most cases, that would be an oral regimen for someone who decides to discontinue lenacapavir who still needs PrEP. So there have been to date 2 very detailed reports from Purpose 2 of people who acquired HIV while on lenacapavir. There have been 3 additional infections in both Purpose 1 and Purpose 2, but we don't have the detailed information yet. That we do have that was published in New England Journal for these 2 first seroconversions that occurred while on lenacapavir. What you can see in participant A, this person was diagnosed with HIV at week 13, and at the preceding visits did have lenacapavir concentrations above the range of what one would expect to be protective for HIV PrEP. You can also see based on this that the person did not have any detectable HIV at prior visits, including baseline weeks 4 and weeks 8. For the other seroconversion, it's a somewhat similar picture, although there was a lower level. This person was diagnosed at week 26 with HIV. There were lower levels of lenacapavir at week 8, but at week 13, there was no detectable HIV by quantitative RNA, and this also includes single copy RNA that was published in the supplement. And so it appears that drug levels were sufficient and that there is no clear indication about why the drug may have failed in either of these cases so far, and we are awaiting additional information. So, Rafi, let me ask you, what does this change for you? How does lenacapavir change the landscape of PrEP for you?
Yeah, no, thanks, Colleen. And obviously, this is a really important question here. I think this is really exciting. This one 2024 science breakthrough of the year. I think the opportunity to have less frequent healthcare system contacts is really powerful in this time when resources are being cut down, both in the United States and globally for HIV prevention. And with relatively short follow up, the tremendous high levels of prevention efficacy are also notable and really exciting. So I think the real question that I have is we don't fully yet understand how willing payers are going to be to cover this. And when it gets out of the clinical trials setting, are people going to like the subcutaneous injections and how frequently do they have nodules and their profile? I think are all questions that we need to be answered. I think as clinics think about this and think about implementing this, it's going to be really important to think about who's going to help patients navigate the payer approval process, and then who's going to sort of be a champion in your clinics to make sure that people come in for the required visits. If they are in a population who needs more frequent STI testing, how are you going to accomplish that and make sure that this every 6-month interval for PrEP doesn't make us fall down on the frequency of STI testing and treatment to interrupt those cycles? And then sort of the long-term follow-up of this are really exciting. Of course, there's a once yearly formulation of this that's in phase 3 clinical trials that can make this even more exciting, but is going to continue to ask these questions. That's how I'm thinking about it. I think the demand for this is going to be tremendous. So we need to start thinking now about what the operations are going to be support its use. What about you, Colleen?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've all been absolutely, I hate to use the word giddy, but at the possibility of what lenacapavir can do to end the HIV epidemic and to really prevent HIV for just a broad range of people who need it. And I think the possibilities or the potential for that is going to come down to the logistics and what you said. It's going to come down to payer source in the US. It's going to come down to global availability and infrastructure. And with all of these things currently under threat, it really remains to be seen what will happen. I think we've also been asked quite a bit, are people going to drop cabotegravir in favor of lenacapavir? And I think that the logistics of less frequent monitoring, less frequent injections, and laboratory tests makes you think that people would probably favor the longer acting injectable. But I think that remains to be seen based on any number of logistical challenges that our clinics could be faced with.
Yeah, I agree, Colleen. And some people may prefer an intramuscular injection versus a subcutaneous. And
Sure.
some people actually do better with more contacts, particularly young people, trans individuals. I think the balance between what's the best interval between administration events is something that we actually don't know the answer to, and we need more data. But I think more options is always better. And if this is something that could bring more people to the table about a conversation for PrEP because the other modalities didn't seem doable or attractive to them, then that's a win if we can find a way to get it to them.
Absolutely. We will stay on for a few more minutes to answer a few questions. The next question is for you, Rafi. Some more information about the updated recommendations for TAF and people with a vagina. They missed the name of the organization that published those just this week, I think.
Yeah, no problem. So that came out in JAMA last Friday. It's a letter to the editor, full disclosure of conflicts. I'm the first author on that, but it's in the final paragraph of the updated guidance on the use of lenacapavir and also TAF FTC. So it's in JAMA, and it's available online. And just to circle back to the other question about RNA monitoring in follow-up, I would just point out that although the package insert still does say you have to do RNA monitoring, I would refer you actually to the IAS 2024 updated guidelines from last December, also in JAMA, that actually removes that recommendation for follow-up monitoring of RNA. So if you missed that, maybe take a look at it, because we're worried about updated guidance from the CDC may be delayed or not forthcoming given the recent federal changes. So just keep that in mind and take a look at that. There's a question also from Karen. Why in your PI does it refer to 2 incident infections and 4 prevalent infections in Purpose 1? Just to be clear, neither Colleen nor I work for the company that made it, so it's not our package insert. But Colleen did mention that there are some additional cases, 2 in Purpose 1 and 1 in Purpose 2, that have not yet been publicly presented. So I won't speak for Colleen, but I know I was surprised to see those in the package insert. So we look forward to more public presentation of the characteristics of those cases. I think Colleen addressed if there were any special nuances for the 2 infections in Purpose 2. Someone asked about that. Colleen, someone asked if you would recommend having patients take the PO-Len for the first and second days in clinic, or at least the first dose as a DOT. How are you thinking about that?
Well, just the logistics, my understanding is that these will be 2 separate drugs that will require 2 separate prescriptions. So it will not come together. So the injection will be prescribed separately from the loading doses, from the oral doses. So in order to make that happen, the patient would likely need to go fill the prescription at the pharmacy and bring it to the clinic to actually do that to get their injection. So that might be a little bit logistically challenging. It's not something that you'll be able to kind of have on hand with your injection doses. In the clinical trials, the participants took the 2 pills on day 1, and then the second pills were taken at home. And so I don't think there's any reason to stray from that for DOT on the second day. But I do think the separate prescriptions will make it a little bit challenging to always ensure that there was, necessarily DOT on that first dose. But if you have close kind of contact and communication with your pharmacy, you might be able to work that out, I guess, in some instances.
Yeah, and Colleen, I don't know if you have heard this, but what I have heard from our pharmacy team is, unlike the oral cabotegravir, which is only available from one central pharmacy if you want to use it for either the oral lead-in with cabotegravir or bridging, this oral lenacapavir is actually going to be available widely at commercial pharmacies. That's the rumor. I've not confirmed that, but I don't know if you had heard that as well.
That's my understanding. Total available as a totally separate medication, and let's also not forget we also have a recommendation for bridging with the oral dosing. If someone has late dose for some reason, they can't come for an injection, what have you, we can prescribe weekly lenacapavir to bridge them as well. And so, yes, different than cabotegravir.
Great. Someone asked if there were available pictures of nodules in a broad range of skin colors and types. I have not seen any such publications, but I think it's a really important question that we'll need to think about going forward is, are there differences in the way those nodules look or present in people of different melanin content skins? So I don't know about that. Someone asked, how are thigh injections administered again? Colleen, I didn't actually do any of the Purpose 1 or 2 trials. Do you know?
We did do Purpose 1 at our research site, but the alternate sites that have been selected have not been thighs to date. So we've not done any thighs. We've done some other sites. Back of the arm in particular has been requested by participants, but have not done any thighs. Again, it's a subcutaneous injection. So I guess, certainly there's a less adipose tissue on the thigh in some individuals versus the abdomen. And so I think that could or could not contribute to tolerability, but I think it's a good question that sub-Q on the thigh might be a little more challenging than in the abdomen.
I think we're going to really look to implementation to get broader experience with these non-abdominal injection sites and their tolerability. So I think it's a question that we're all going to be looking forward to learning from each other about, honestly, as we get more experience with it. Somebody asked, what's the average duration of the nodule and how big? There is some data in actually the package insert about this. We really don't have time to get into it. I will say that some of them can be quite long lasting, so just keep that in mind.
And median size, I think, is 3 centimeters.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Colleen. Someone asked about the risk long tail of lenacapavir versus cabotegravir, and the half-life, is the concern greater? I think the one thing I would say about tails is personally, and this is me speaking, I don't actually pay attention to the tail, to be honest with you, except for drug-drug interactions. Because if someone is ongoingly likely being exposed to HIV and they've stopped an injectable product, they need a different form of HIV prevention. So I don't worry about that, to be honest with you. You'll remember with cabotegravir, after 6 months after the last injection, there wasn't in clinical trials a risk of integrase resistance. And here it seemed like a large proportion of the breakthroughs, period, had capsid resistance, but less of a concern because it's not part of most first-line treatment regimens. Colleen, I don't know if you have a different way of thinking about that.
No, you're the tail expert I go to.
Okay. Do we know if this will be covered on the medical or pharmacy benefit? I have heard, I don't want to speak out of school here, that it is going to be part of the medical benefit. I don't know if that is universally true, but I think we're going to find out. So I don't know for sure. Okay. Someone asked, how soon should a different PrEP option be started if desired by the patient? Someone discontinues lenacapavir. I think the answer to that is 28 weeks after the last injection. Because remember, the window on a follow-up injection is 2 weeks, and it would ordinarily be administered at 26 weeks. Colleen, anything else that you wanted to jump in and address real quickly?
I did see a question about interactions with contraceptives. No interactions with contraceptives or hormones. So that's an important for our patients that need PrEP. So no interactions anticipated with either of those. Yeah, there's so many questions in here. I wish that we could certainly get to them all. And I think a lot we will be finding out as we start to prescribe this drug and give it to everyone who needs it, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We really appreciate the great engagement and questions. And please, let's all share with each other our experiences as this rolls out. We're all going to be learning together. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Kelley and Dr. Landovitz, and many thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us. As a reminder, to view the full program, Advances in HIV Care, a rapid response webinar series, please click the link in the show notes. To get access to all of our new podcasts, subscribe to the CCO Infectious Disease Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Thank you and have a great day.